Well, thank you all for showing up at such an early hour for those of us in the United States. I'm Tami Brancamp. This is my husband, Dave. And we wanted to start talking and sharing about aphasia and math. So the first thing we thought we would share a little bit is how did we get here? This has been a really long and winding road for me. I've been a medical speech pathologist since the early 2000s. And in that time, all the way up to today, I have people with aphasia who get frustrated, angry, irritated, sad that they can't do numbers. And along all those years, as a clinician, I felt really frustrated because I wasn't able to help them. I didn't know, and don't even know if I know today, how do I help somebody with aphasia relearn their number abilities, their number processing and calculations? To do that, I've also had to address my own math insecurities. So I don't know if any of you are super confident in your math abilities, but some of us along our life journeys have learned to be fearful of math, even though we don't really need to be. And then the other part of this is the literature in number processing and calculation, or mathematics, is intense. It's intense. You know, I've come a long ways. I've done a lot of schooling. I've learned how to do school. And the literature is really quite difficult to grasp. So as a clinician in my heart, I find that we're not helping our clinicians learn how to do this. But we get presented with it a lot in our rehab options, outpatient therapies, and so on. And the other part is this is something that they never taught me in grad school. So Dave has his story of how he got here, besides being married to me for a long, long time.
Thank you, Tammy. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today on this. And just real quick, my background, I have over 30 years of experience in the educational side. 15 years teaching middle school students mathematics. So I absolutely love that group. I know some people that might scare you, but those kids are amazing to me. And for me, it was always math is a fun part. It's like a game. It's always been an enjoyable part of my life and what I did and what I got to share with my students. So I've always felt Tammy's frustration when she would come home and share some of the insights from working with her clients, their frustration. And they want to know. And just for all of us here, so that we're all not running away, oh my gosh, there's a math guy on the screen, it's basic operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with whole numbers. None of all that fancy math that we might all had to have as we went through school. And the other part was hearing the clinicians that Tammy worked with. You know, these are smart. All of you are really smart, and that fear of math it's personal to me. It hits me in the heart because it's always an important part of my teaching is to make math fun, and so that maybe you don't have to love it like I do, but hopefully you get to like it. So that was one of the areas that I just figured, let's join our two forces together.
Yeah, that's great.
We're excited.
Also, the timing. All right. So finding the gifts in COVID-19. Most of us are online. As we know, a lot of our people with aphasia are online, and we also know that we are losing some because they're not able to be with the technology at this point in time. So hopefully we'll be able to help them down the road. We are in Reno, Nevada, and our aphasia center members, there were 7 of them who said, hey, let's do this. Every one of them says, I'm frustrated that I can't do math. I'm far along in the process. I know this is something you want to do and we want to do. So we're doing it in a PCORI idea, patient-centered outcome research, where the people living with the condition are centered to what we're doing, and they have just as strong a voice as the rest of us. And yes, I am quarantined with a math teacher. Help me, please. All right, so a little bit of background. It is complicated, way more complicated than I thought when I first started looking at it. Excuse me. So the way Dave and I look at aphasia plus math is that it does take the 3 parts. It takes the clinician, it takes the person with aphasia, and it also takes the care partners. And as Dave and I have talked over the years, a person's attitude and confidence in aphasia and in mathematics matters. The learning environment, the aphasia severity, mathematics literacy, which Dave will talk about in a little bit. But the thing that's also fascinating when I kind of dove in was number processing and calculations. That's the fancy term in the literature for mathematics. Is it does use linguistic numerical symbols. It has its own lexicon, syntax, and semantics. Those are words that are super familiar to those of us who work in language and language disorders. So the lexicon being number of words and digits, syntax, rules of combination, and the semantics, the numerosity. It is complicated for sure. And Dave, you want to touch on that for us?
Yeah. Thank you, Tami. So it's amazing as you guys all play a lot with what happens in the brain with your patients, and especially with our aphasia folks that we're working with. The same happens in our math world. Is, you know, we see math as these numbers. It could be pictures. It's words. And that is the biggest part that I've learned in working with a lot of Tami's clients and even with her clinicians is this is a world I'm not familiar with. You know, the aphasia folks were not my middle school students, so I've had to learn. It's a constant set. And then, you know, naturally we also have these algorithms and tables. It's multi-dimensional. It plays in all parts of the brain, so real interesting. Another part that was real key, though, is the words. So as we look at the next part, some of you may be familiar with Dr. Ball from Michigan. She did some amazing work in looking at language and math. And what happens even when we're just talking with folks just generally about that is we have our native language. Obviously, Tami and I are talking to you with English as our background, but it could be Spanish, Russian, you know, whatever your native language. So you have that. We know all the benefits and the sides of language there. But when you think about when someone goes to school, there's school language. There's this academic language that happens. There's things that we always laugh at as teachers, you know, like getting in line, raising your hand to go to the restroom, silly things that we all laugh at in our everyday. But there's the points to that we work with. And then content language. Math has its own language, just like every other subject does. And think about it, you're playing between three worlds just there. How hard that would be. And just want to show you an example. So looking at something that we all hopefully feel comfortable with. What does two mean in each of those? Notice we spell it three different ways that have different meanings. For example, the two at the top up there that Tami has her cursor next to versus the two in the fifth bullet down have different meanings, right? That two down there meaning for 20. Then we have, and it might scare people at the moment, but that two in a fraction.
Don't like fractions.
You know, that scary part, or even more. How about the two as an exponent? And imagine when people think when you say feet squared, for the first time, you know where kids look? They look down at your feet and wonder, those aren't square. And so we have these bizarre playings with language. So it definitely is complicated, Tami. Yeah. It's unique. So I'd like you to finish because it's interesting with some of this, how it connects to the neural sides that you know.
Yeah. Well, I found too, when you look in the literature, that the neural activations for language and numerical processing and calculations are partially overlapped and partially independent. So when we say it's complicated, it's complicated. But we have a mission to learn and get that complicated literature in an accessible way so that clinicians, people with aphasia, can start to have interventions that are really doable. So tonight's presentation and discussion is really, for today, it's going to be about the clinicians. How do we help clinicians get started? But in order to do that, we do need to have a little bit of discussion about mathematics because, as Dave mentioned, math has a language. In aphasia, we have a language, and we're trying to come together and have a shared language so that when a math guy says something, the language gal is going, I don't know what you're talking about. So we're working on blending that, and it's going to be really important.
That's huge.
But these are some of the foundational skills is where we'd like to start tonight.
So thank you, Tami. If you look, some of you may have heard, you know, some people think we have number sense. It's just like a genetic. but it's your ability to really play with the number. It's the understanding, like you were looking just a minute ago at the number 2, is that there's 2 of something versus there's 20. That 2 has a different meaning, right? Its size, it's how it relates to other numbers, how they could be affected by when we do these operations. I mean, you saw that just how we use the 2 as an exponent, as a fraction. So, how does that sit and how comfortable we play with those? And one of the things that stood out, and I said it earlier, I just want to go back to, we're talking the basic operations. Don't panic. This is not a calculus course. This is not looking even at some of those fractions right now. We're just going to work with our clinicians and our clients on adding, subtracting, multiplication possibly, and even division to that extent. But you can see all those terms that we use with it. How many times, lots of, sums, different words we've used for those that we want to be comfortable with because they mean different things for a math person.
Yeah.
Versus, as we've discovered working with my wife here on the side with aphasia and your speech pathologist. So language is key. It's really important that we understand. So, with the sets, when we looked at them, it's really how comfortable they are with those basic operations, because that's what we use for everyday living. So hopefully that helps and gives us a starting point.
So just some background on it. And then for us, we wanted to share with you a little bit how we got started with we have 7 participants who are creating this with us. So what we decided to do is we came up with some basic tools that are really accessible, inexpensive. We made kits for each of our 7 people, and we delivered them because we were in COVID. So we masked up and gowned up and drove them to everybody's house because they're in our community. Dave and I created a math screening tool. We based it off of making sure we were looking at what our aphasia tests are looking at for numbers and number processing. And then we took the math educator's knowledge and we created a screening tool to see where each individual, where their strengths were and where their challenges were. And then we completed individual assessments. We wanted to show you a little bit of how we are setting up our space because we want people to see our face. We want to see our participants' face on Zoom, so we have 2 faces, but we also need to see what they're doing with their desktop, and they need to see what we're doing with our desktop. So as you can see in the photo, we've just built up with a secondary iPad, kind of a dock camera, all right? And we've also taught our members, our participants, how to do it on their side, whether they're using a smartphone, an iPad, or another tablet. And it's been very successful and quite creative. So go ahead.
Sorry, Tami. It's real important too that we get to see their faces.
Yeah.
They, in this time with the COVID crisis, obviously it'd be nice if we could be all face to face like I am sitting next to my wife, but that's not possible. But their faces tell me an awful lot of where they're going, where their frustration might be, where their excitement is, which is the fun part, as you can well imagine. But it also allows us to know where we push and not, just like you do in your world with them on language.
Allows us to get that feedback.
Yes.
Dave is going to show us, he's going to start with some of the activities we've been doing with the clients. A little bit of what we're approaching to is gamification, right? Growing up, I never put math and fun in the same sentence. So that's Dave. He's like, math and fun. I'm like, okay, I'm open to this possibility. Teach me, old man, teach me. So what we have been doing are some of these activities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change out my doc cam. If I can pin that video. Hopefully you're able to see that.
So, why Tami said that, it's just a regular deck of cards, but what I have done, simply because of the clients we're working with, and to help too with the clinicians as they understand, is we took out all the face cards. Because for this game of basically looking at addition, playing back and forth, we just really wanted to work with the numbers from 1 through 10, so they could play around with those. For everybody, if we can get this to see, aces would count for a 1, And some of you who may have played on this side or looked at it, you may have heard the game called Crypto. Sounds like a scary little name,
Yeah.
but it's a version of playing with a deck of cards that you would lay out, in this case, 5 cards, and then what we're going to call our target number, and add, subtract, multiply, or divide some combination to make this target number. So Tami, did you ever enjoy in school doing worksheets?
No.
Most of us probably not, right? 20, 30 problems, you repeat through it. Some of us who were good at it, great, it was easy homework to get done, but not exciting.
No, there's nothing fun as dread.
So I'm going to put out 5 cards for us.
So let's see if you can make sure you can see on the screen.
See if we can see them. Tell me if I need to drop them down
Yeah, bring
a
them
little
down a
lower.
bit. There you
Thank you. Can we see those
Yeah.
roughly? So we have a 3, a 5, a 2, a 4, and a 7. Doesn't matter if they're hearts, spades, that's not important at this point. So we're concerned more about the number. And here's our target number over here to the side is the number 9. As Tami was describing, the folks we're working with, her clients, and for all of you watching, it's basic work, right? We just want them to add or subtract. So in this case, let's just start. My number's 9 that I want to try to make. What, can you find 2 numbers, 2 of these cards you could put together, add to make 9?
Okay, so the idea is we're trying to get to 9, so I would say I can do a 7 plus a 2 to get me to 9.
Great.
Okay. Now, when we're looking at our 7 participants right now, 6 of them are falling into the basic operations, and some are at single 1 to 2 digits. Some could add 2 or 3 cards to get to 9. One might even be able to add 4 cards, or working up to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we start, of course, where the client's at, just like we do in language therapy. So what would you do here?
And so some of them too, they'll have, if you notice what I put these cards on, it's a little whiteboard that I'm just going to slide them up for a moment. We might want them to go ahead and just write that down, what Tami said, so they can see it. Because one of the things we found very fascinating was when they wrote it versus saying it.
Mm-hmm.
The language sometimes is, and we have a gentleman who's pretty advanced as far as the math side. He struggles with anything when it hits a 20.
Yep.
Saying the word 20 was difficult for him, but if I looked on the screen so we could see their screen, what they wrote, probably 9 out of 10 times, what they wrote was correct.
Correct. So it's real important that you do set it up so you can see what they're writing, as well as what they're saying and their visual feedback.
The other side we found too was, as you just saw what I did there, was I erased that out so they didn't get confused. Having too many things, sometimes we might have just did when Tami picked these, is just pull these other cards out of the way.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes then we would actually just write the operation in, leave the cards there. Again, just like all of the language therapy we do, we adapt it to the abilities of our clients, and we also take them right to the edge. Where is that grappling level,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where they just on the edge of learning. Yes, it's challenging, and they're also having success.
So I'm going to put our cards back. I'm going to challenge Tami at 1 in the morning, just what she wants, I'm sure. But she's a good trooper with it. Like she said, she's been stuck with this math guy all during quarantine. Can you do it with 3 of the cards? Can you add? Let's just keep it real simple on the adding side to make 9 for us.
Okay. So I would say a 3 plus 4 plus 2 equals 9.
And you can see what she did there. She moved them out of our way so we can get and come back and just put those in. Or maybe they go ahead and write the 3 plus 4 plus 2 equals the 9.
Mm-hmm.
And let them say it as well.
Yeah, so we bring in the language too. And you may have wanted to write it vertically.
Mm-hmm.
For some folks, that would be an easier orientation for them to process.
Yep.
especially once we hit, like if we were continuing on and we had, untime, let's just put what you said there, we might have had to even have it stepped through so
Break
they
it
could
down.
then see it in parts, and doing it in a variety of ways so they could see it both ways. But it's really amazing to watch them work through. Some who can do it real fast in their head, because some of us, we might automatically just go, well, I already know 3 and 4 is 7, and they have that already memory. But when we ask them to write it, it took them a little bit. So it's a good skill for me as the math teacher, for Tami and her clinicians as they were working, is why did you ask them to do that? Because it's important. Remember, one of our things is number sense, because we want them to feel comfortable. Because when we ask them why they wanted to know math, most of it's for when they're out at a restaurant wanting to maybe even just do a simple tax tip, add something up, and not feel that they can't be part of that. Or
to have that independence, grocery store, pins. And our clients have said, yeah, there are apps, and we know there's apps for that, and those are good tools. Use them all the time. But there's also an empowerment of a person who used to be an engineer or has multiple degrees, or just used to take advantage of being able to do math without thinking about it. So it's very meaningful, and it's a live participation approach when we start talking about numbers. Do you want to share a little bit with the dice?
Sure. One real quick thing, and I'll do the dice. The other thing, we could get rid of that target number. You could just put down a couple cards, and if they were, like in this case, if I just wanted to work on subtraction, I could just say, well, let's subtract these two. And they could do that. So it's not that you need all these fancy worksheets or anything. A deck of cards have all these numbers, for our sake, for most of our clinicians and for our clients, make it so they can do it as we all remember without having to go to our negative numbers. We want the bigger number on that side so they can play or whatever. So lots of fun things you could do with these. You could multiply them and see what comes up. The other one I'm going to just throw out there is, hopefully you see this dice. There was no sound, simply because one of the things, these are the foam little dice. They're fun for when I was in the classroom, because you could play with the dice and it wasn't distracting.
It wasn't super noisy, yeah.
So we have a set for them. You could roll these dice and simply say, in this case here, there's a 3 and a 5. Can you add them? And then I would roll a pair of dice. So if Tami had another set, she could roll, and then we compare. So let's just say we added 3 plus 5. So I have 8. And Tami, go ahead and roll those for us. And I'll get us another color. Oh, here she goes. She has 4 plus 5.
And I would say it's 9.
And then I would ask them, which number is larger? So that it's not just, and then we would keep track. We might have had chips up here or whatever, and I could put, in this case, D for Dave and T for Tami, and Tami gets a point. It's amazing to watch when they just see, let's say we did this at the end of a game. I would erase these so they're not confused by the numbers and say, so who won, Tami? How many do you have? How many do I have? So they can count that. So it's just, again, what we might consider real basic, but for them it's an interesting side, but it lets me see how they count. You could see some of Tami's clients use their fingers, so they would count 1, 2, 3 and count that way, or just 1, 2, 3, and then work up. So it gives us a foundation of where they are. Others would look straight out and just say 3.
Yeah.
So, it gave us some good language to play with. Again, I'm going to borrow Tami's numbers of 4 and 5. With one of her clients, we were working with multiplication, and I remember I told you he had a difficult time with 20. Here's an example. He knew he could write this as I am, and he had it right. I could see it on his, but he could not tell us that answer. Yeah. So you knew the math was there. It had to be a language side. So I am grateful because Tami's next to me all the time. I'm not skilled in this. I'm not trained as you all are in speech pathology, but I do enjoy and love playing with numbers. So I've learned how to use the language and more concrete examples as well. So that part's been really fun to see. So, you can do lots of things with dice. We even did the other night. They had a math or a game night and played Yahtzee.
Yeah.
The game of Yahtzee, if anybody's familiar with 5 dice and adding them all up and finding different sets and the values.
Do you want me
So
to stop that?
they could do that. Yes, you're good with that. So, it's amazing what's out there in their realm, so they could play around with dice and compare, and then work as well with their caregivers, their care partners. So
I think what I want to mention too on the tools is, personally, I don't really enjoy playing games. So I have to get out of my comfort zone and my bias.
Yeah.
But I also don't like doing math worksheets. So how am I going to learn as a clinician how to do some of the basic operations so that I can help my clients learn in a hierarchy, meet them where they are, and help them grow? Using tools like this, it makes it more comfortable. So far, the 7 that we're working with, they really enjoy the challenge. They enjoy the gamification, which has been interesting to me. They like to win. Who doesn't? And at the same time, they're having the laughter and the fun that also creates a good learning environment. You'll also notice that even within our participants, there's different levels of emotional kind of attachment to the challenge, but also each of these people are at a different point in their process of aphasia recovery or living with aphasia. So that also comes into play. What else is there anything else you want to talk about?
One of the things that makes a big difference, as you all know, if we sat down and did a worksheet, you could see them go through, but then unless you're sitting next to them, one of the most fascinating things we've found so far as they go through is they would often self-correct.
Yeah.
As they would go through, they would know, like, for example, 4 times 4 that is on a dice that's here in front of me right now, they might say 15 at first and then immediately go, no. I could then have a discussion. Why did you correct that? What's wrong with that? So you can, for me, in the math side, it's important to understand what they know and don't know, what they're comfortable with, and where some of those areas they still want to work with. So that questioning and having dialogue back and forth is real important, and that's where we're starting that work now with some of Tami's clinicians, because that's a skill set I've been graced to have, because I've had over, like I said, 30 years experience in playing that. So how to share that as well as learn from Tami and her clinicians where I need to help on that end. So it's been an exciting run on those, and it's fun. It makes it a difference that these folks actually love to challenge, as we would call it, Dr. Brancamp, as their you guys want to challenge Dr. Brancamp on a dice game or someone, and they love to have that place, and it makes it also personal to them.
Yeah, it's having those interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
All right, we have just a couple minutes, so I want to wrap this up. Where are we going with this project? Right now, we've been working with 7 people individually, and at the end of it, we say, hey, this is what you did in session today. You could take this, work with your care partner, your loved one, and then we realize, that's a big language load. So what we're going to be doing is creating short, aphasia-friendly instructional videos that we can send with them that they can practice these. And we're also going to be looking at really doing some engaging, fun, and accessible training programs for clinicians and educators, as well as for people with aphasia and their care partners. Yeah. We can be reached at, we do have a Facebook page that we're starting, Aphasia Plus Math, and we're hoping to share the videos there, get things going. Our emails are listed, and there will be an up-and-coming aphasia-math.com website.